We're coming into Mark chapter 4. It's Jesus' busy day. We started it off last week, and we left off with him having done or taught the parables. So his day is continuing, the busy day. So coming into Mark chapter 4, I'm going to give you the parallels for this, all right? So Mark 4, we're looking at verses 35 to 41. Matthew, his parallel, is in chapter 8 and verses 23 to 27. And Luke, he's in chapter 8, verses 22 to 25. Now, the question was, or the comment was made last week, Carolyn, I believe, where you had mentioned, have mercy on me, son of David, in Matthew chapter 9, which of course came before Matthew chapter 12. And we've been looking at chapter 12 and 13 of Matthew, and now Matthew, we're going back to chapter 8. Remember, he deals with some things thematically. And there's spots that he'll say on the same day or things like that. So then we've got to see how that fits together and balance it with what Luke and Mark are doing as well. So chapter 8, some portions of it, and chapter 9, particularly what you mentioned last week, is going to come later on. Chapter 9 is, have mercy on me, son of David. And the section here regarding going across the Sea of Galilee is, Matthew had put that sometime before this as part of what he was theming or grouping together. But looking at Mark, what he says here, particularly on that first verse, verse 35, notice the first phrase, what he says, keeping in mind that he's just finished speaking about the use of parables. He's done the parables. And now in verse 35, Deb, the first phrase, what does it say?
That day.
On that day. Some texts, some translations will say, on that same day. Okay, so on that day. So we're continuing on. Let's take it down to verse 41, please.
On that day when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?"
Why is Jesus going across the sea? Is it just he feels like taking a sail? All right, going to go teach over there, or you think, or do some... He's got a purpose in going across. And we're going to see that. The demoniac, yes. So he's going over there with a specific purpose. Now, as he's getting ready to go across, there's some things to keep in mind. So I want to look at the map on your screen, if we can, please. So Capernaum is at the top of your map. And I need to bring this up here. Excuse me just a second. So the top of the Sea of Galilee, I should say. All right. And the Decapolis is on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee and down along the southern region of the Sea of Galilee as well. Okay, does that make sense? It's not all of that land, but see, Decapolis means what? Anybody have any idea? 10 cities. So that's why it's called the Decapolis. Deca is 10, polis is city. So you think of metropolis, metropolis, the very big city. That's where we get these two words. But by the time of Jesus, those 10 cities were actually 18, but they didn't change the name because, well, the name had already stuck. It was already what it was identified as. The Decapolis. For the Jewish people, we can take our attention off of there for a minute and then we'll come back to it, all right? So for the Jewish people, there was never a more biblically literate or determined to be more faithful than when Jesus appeared on the scene. Throughout Israel's history, this is probably one of the most biblically literate times, and the times that they are most focused or determined to be faithful. Now, it didn't mean they were getting it right. It just means their determination was there. And we saw the Pharisees are really giving some difficulty in the midst of this, in their training, the teaching the people, their upbringing. So they have a strong influence from the Pharisees. But their determination is strong. All right? Does that make sense? Now, when the nation of Israel is formed, what was their formation? What was it that defined them as a nation? When were they defined as a nation? What was the defining moment for them?
Would it be when the 10 tribes acquired a certain section?
Okay, so
That's
we'd be talking about the 12 tribes.
Yeah,
12 tribes of Israel. Good guess, but not quite. What was the defining moment? What was the experience that they had? What is the backdrop? What is it?
Coming out of Egypt?
Coming out of Egypt. Yeah,
You weren't really explaining that well.
it wasn't, sorry, that's my fault. I wasn't explaining it. I wasn't setting up the question well enough for you to be able to take it where you would otherwise been able to have done it. So coming out of Egypt was their formation as a nation.
The first time they were called the children of the sons of Israel.
Yeah, or the nation of Israel. Exodus chapter 19. By this point in time, we're going to have a look there. By this point in time, they are now a couple of months out of Egypt, and they have just arrived at Mount Sinai. I want to read one verse in particular, and it's verse 6.
Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites.
All right. Kingdom of priests and a holy nation out of all the peoples of the earth. Now, there's going to be some defining of that throughout the coming months. See, Moses, he's going to go up on the mountain, and then when he comes down, he's going to find in chapter 33 that the people are giving themselves to sin and worshiping false idols, the golden calf. And it's at that point that Moses says, whoever's on the Lord's side, come to me. Strap on your swords and go throughout the camp, and those who are still reveling in their sin, then put them to the sword. Who was it who came? The Levites. So they were given then the Lord as their inheritance, and they were then tasked as a priesthood. But they still had this overarching sense that as a nation, there is to be a distinction of them apart from the other nations. And in that sense, a kingdom of priests. Not that they were a kingdom of priests to minister at the tabernacle and later the temple, but a kingdom of priests being set apart, a holy nation. Throughout Israel's history, from that point on, there were times that they were very devoted in their separation and their holiness unto the Lord. And other times, they were to the point that they had really adopted the ways of the world. They became more and more like the world around them. So the result of becoming like the world and rejecting or ignoring the commands of God, the Lord judged them and sent them into exile, and they experienced their captivity in Babylon. The northern kingdom, of course, they were defeated by the Assyrians, and they were taken and strewn throughout the nations, those that survived, and those that remained in the land. The Assyrians populated the region with other nations that then intermarried with the Jews, and they lost their national identity as Jews. They became known as the Samaritans. But after the exile and return to Jerusalem, there was a devotion to the things of God. It was during their Babylonian captivity that really they stopped with their multifaceted or polytheism, many gods, worshiping many gods, and focused on worshiping the one true God exclusively. And by the time of Jesus, it was almost to the point of exclusion of everyone else. The Gentiles, they think back to the time of Jonah, and you'll have the kind of mindset that the Jews had during the time of Jesus. Jonah was given the task to go to the Ninevites, capital city of Assyria, and he didn't want to go, right? There's many reasons for that, but let's look at it at least being that the Gentiles don't deserve, or they're not godly enough, or they're too ungodly, I guess, to be reached. Because if we go amongst them, we're going to become defiled. So it's in a similar sense that the people are pursuing holiness, even though it's a holiness or a righteousness that looks a lot like the Pharisees. They're still pursuing that nonetheless. And over there on the other side, so looking back to that map again, where the Decapolis is, the other side is what it was referred to. That they would not go there unless they absolutely had to. There were some that would never, ever go there in their lifetime because it represented, it was distinctly pagan. It had its pagan shrines and temples, their practices of evil. It was something that the Jews shunned, something they stayed away from. It represented really the three evils for the Jews: adultery, idolatry, and bloodshed. So for the Jews, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. And it's to the other side, over there, that Jesus says, let's cross over to the other side. So for his disciples, this is like, wow, okay, why do we want to go there? There's an entire sea here, and of course the sea is more technically a lake, as we know. Incidentally, the Sea of Galilee, known by other names, the Sea of Kinnereth, the Sea of Tiberias, it is the lowest body of fresh water on the planet. And the Dead Sea is the lowest body of salt water on the planet. This is apart from streams and brooks and rivers, but body of water as far as fully enclosed like a lake. So here they are, getting ready, or not getting ready, but they're on their way over to the other side. They're going to encounter these pagans they're almost like an idea of that they're worse than, because of the concentration of these Gentiles that are there over and above the Gentiles that are interspersed throughout the rest of the country. At least there's some godly influence in their lives. Peter, he didn't quite get it, even to the point that in Acts chapter 10, there would be 3 times that the Lord would lower a sheet down in a vision with all kinds of unclean animals, and the Lord said to Peter, "Rise, kill, and eat." And Peter will realize, okay, the Lord's showing me something here, and he says, "Lord, I've never eaten any unclean thing." And he says, what does the Lord tell him at the end of that? Don't call. So anything that I call clean, don't call it unclean. So he was telling him that these things that he had regarded as unclean are now clean. And it was in reference specifically to the Gentiles and servants of Cornelius, a Roman soldier. He was asking him to come to see him, to preach the gospel. And Peter otherwise likely would not have had gone, or gone reluctantly. And when he arrives at Cornelius' house, he's going to tell him, it's not lawful for me to eat at your house or to come into your house, me being a Jew and you being a Gentile. But the Lord does a work, and he says, but the Lord has shown me that I'm to come in. But he still doesn't, he's working through all of this because his entire upbringing has been this segregation between the Jews and the Gentiles. Isaiah chapter 52 and verse 11. Let's have a look there. Isaiah 52 and verse 11. Yeah, we're at Johnny, I believe.
11. Depart, go out from there. Touch no unclean thing. Come out from it and be pure. You who carry the vessel of the Lord.
All right. Come out from among them, or from there. Don't touch any unclean thing. This is what Paul will quote when he speaks about the separation between the followers of Christ. He says, and those that are ungodly. He says that what fellowship does the church have with Belial? None. So come out from among these people and be separate, says the Lord. So that's 2 Corinthians chapter 6. So this is their mindset. And now Jesus is saying, let's go over there. So let's bring up the next map. Over there. All right, so they are coming over to this region, the eastern shore. So just let's have a look at the eastern shore. And you'll see Gergesa. You see it on the map? Barely, but it's there. Yep, so we got, the writing is kind of faint, but it's there nonetheless. We'll come up to the next. That just gives a little different perspective. And just below Gergesa, you see there's a name, a word. It's called Kursi. Kursi.
How far is it from one side to the other?
The width of the sea, it's about 14 kilometers, I think. So it's not very wide. And the length of it is about 21. What is it? 13 kilometers wide. And I think it's about 21 long.
How far is it from the Confederation Bridge? How long is that?
That's about the same distance. Yeah. So it gives you a bit of perspective regarding that. So they're getting ready to come over here. And for the disciples, it would have been a bit of a, What in the world? Now, Jesus knows why he's going over himself. The disciples don't know yet why he's going over. But do you remember last week how we started off? What did Jesus do in Matthew chapter 12? He healed the deaf and mute man. More specifically, what was... So cast a demon out of a man, causing him to be deaf and mute. And do you remember what Jesus said regarding, in order to be able to do that, what must first be done if you're going to break into a strong man's house? You've got to bind up the strong man. Now, for the Jews, and in reality for the world, they only had a mindset of two kingdoms, the kingdom of God and the kingdom of darkness. And that's the case. Jesus even said, no man can serve two masters. There's only two masters, God or mammon. And mammon is money, and mammon also stands for the things that are contrary to God himself. So the Jews recognizing that there's only two kingdoms. Well, Jesus, he's basically, and he said that a kingdom that's divided against itself is not going to stand. Rather, it's going to fall. Well, Jesus is saying, in order to bind a strong man, you've got to be stronger than the strong man. And that's what Jesus did in Matthew chapter 12. And he's getting ready, and he plundered. So when he says in chapter 12, regarding breaking into enter a strong man's house, the purpose of entering the strong man's house is to, verse 29.
Carry off his possessions.
Carry off his possessions. Can't do that unless the person first binds up the strong man. So Jesus, he's plundered the strong man. He has taken his stuff. And what's the stuff in chapter 12? This man. He's getting ready to go across the Sea of Galilee to the other side to do what? Plunder the kingdom of darkness that's as represented over there. This is not far away. You can stand on the shore of Capernaum, and on a clear day, you can see to the southern shore where the Jordan exits the Sea of Galilee. So it's not hard to look across about 5 miles or thereabouts, crossing the corner to the area of the Gerasenes. As they get in the boat and make their way, so we're back in Mark chapter 4, verse 37. There's a great windstorm. The waves beat into the boat so to the point that it was already filling. We looked at that boat in the past. Go ahead, 2 for me, hon, please. These are the recovered remains from discovered in 1984, I think it was, referred to as the Jesus boat. It's not a huge boat, is it? It's about 21 feet long and about 7 feet wide, thereabouts. So it's not a huge boat. But this would be the average fishing boat size from the first century. And this is what they would have been sailing in. And verse 36 tells us that Jesus was on his way with his disciples across, and many other little boats with them. So could have been 1 or 2 person boats that were alongside, or somewhere in between this size and a small vessel. So they're getting ready. They're heading across. This wind and wave storm comes upon them. We can come to the next. See another picture there of that. Now this is a replica built off of the idea or the concept of the Jesus boat remains that were discovered. This is what they're heading in. and Jesus is asleep in the stern. Stern is the front or the back of the boat? A little bit of trivia for you. We got a front, we got a back, we got a back. So there's a stern and there's a bow. So you think of bow as bowing forward. Forward part of the ship is the bow. Back is the stern.
Someone back there.
Using the rudder?
Yeah.
The rudder was on the right side of the boat, usually.
Oh. But that's why I thought you'd be in the front if he was in the back. And it's kind of uncomfortable with the other guy there.
Yeah. Oh, oh. Yeah, it'd be a little difficult. There's a personification almost of this storm. Jesus is heading to the other side, and he's about to plunder the strong man's goods, his kingdom. It's almost as if the strong man sees him coming and starts this tempest. Throws a fit, if you will. Now, we can't say it conclusively, but it sure gives that picture. The open water like this, even though it's an enclosed body of water, is often referred to as a place or symbolizes a place of chaos. Excuse me. It represents or symbolic of the abyss. So a couple of things to keep in mind regarding that. So when you think of in Genesis chapter 1, where the waters were upon the surface of the earth, and the Spirit of God was hovering upon those waters. But then the Lord started to speak about these things, and there was a disorderly aspect of that water, and the picture there is of chaos in a sense. Now, God doesn't create things in a chaotic order, but tradition looks back at that and has this idea of looking at water, bodies of water, as chaotic. Pardon me? That rings a bell, but I can't speak to that directly. As far as chaos is concerned, you mean? Yeah. Just have a look at this real quick. Yeah, without form and void, darkness was on the face of the deep. And so with those ideas, it was this idea of chaos. And so now they're heading across the water, and they're like, okay, great. We're heading to a place we don't really want to go. And now, look at our situation. Look what they said to Jesus in verse 38. He's asleep in the back of the boat on a pillow. So he's perfectly calm. You'd think that they would take their cue from Jesus. Now, Jesus, from the point on where the nation has rejected him as far as the Jewish leadership is concerned, he's going to be doing what he does to instruct his disciples in many respects. And this is one of them, to instruct them and to prepare them for the mission that he's going to leave them, us, with. So they should have taken their cue from Jesus. If he's sleeping, he's resting, pretty safe to conclude that we can take it easy here too. We have nothing to worry about.
Plus, Jesus said also, let us go to the other side. In other words, he was confident they were going to go to the other side.
Yeah, he didn't say, let's start out to the other side and see if we make it.
Yeah.
Let's go to the other side. That's where he's going. Nothing could take Jesus. So they, in the midst of a situation where circumstances are upon you, you can feel overwhelmed by those things, and they have a tendency to lead us without us even giving consideration to what's going on. Don't you care that we drown, he says, they say in verse 38. It's almost an accusation. How can you be asleep at a time like this? Don't you see what kind of a situation we are in here? Don't you care that we are about to drown or about to perish? That's what the sailors said to Jonah. It's interesting, the parallels between Jesus and Jonah in this instance, isn't there? When you think about it, they're both on a mission to the pagan Gentiles.
Jonah was kind of going the opposite way.
Except, so they're both on a mission. They're both on a mission to the Gentiles. But Jonah sailed the opposite way. Jesus sailed directly to them. But they're both asleep in the boat in the middle of a storm. When Jesus stands up, he rebukes the wind and the waves and said what? So quiet, be still. The word is better said peace, with the word being shalom. Pardon me? Oh, the Greek word, which is? Pardon me? I'm going to take your word for it because I didn't look up the Greek. It's all Greek to me. So it's not, and it is
It's not your typical word for peace in the New Testament. It's silence.
silence. Okay.
That's actually, it's not like,
Yeah, it's not peace.
It's not peace. Okay. I stand corrected. When Jesus speaks this, and the wind stops, there was a great calm. Have you ever been on the open water after a storm, like a hurricane has come through, a big storm? Anybody? I remember a hurricane had come through. I forget which one it was. It might have been Juan. And a friend of mine asked me to go sailing with him, I think a day later or 2 days later. And we were in the harbor, so it was fairly protected water. But as soon as we got out of the channel into the open water, we were just like this. And he said, do you know why the water is so choppy? So many swells. And I didn't. And he said, it's because of the hurricane that came through. It stirred up the waters so deeply that it's still waiting to get to that point of equilibrium or calm again. So a storm being over does not automatically cause a body of water to go calm. This is a supernatural act. He said to them, why are you so afraid? So fearful. It has this idea of dread or having no faith, being faithless.
The word there, be still, is actually interesting because it says,
Can you speak just a little bit louder, please?
the word still is interesting there because the Greek word is meaning a muzzle for a beast's mouth. Figuratively, to stop the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a muzzle.
So he muzzles. I was reading a commentary, and when they had made that conclusion or remark, and in regards to he rebuked the wind. And so I'm focusing on the word rebuke, and I couldn't find it, so I rejected it. But it's actually on the word peace, to muzzle.
No. Be still.
Or be still. Peace, be still. So still, be still.
Silence.
Silence,
Quiet. It's not the word peace. It's
So silence,
quiet.
be muzzled.
Be calm. Yeah, and then be muzzled.
Okay.
He uses that same word. He uses that same word in Mark chapter 1 when Jesus commands an evil spirit not to speak.
So when he commands an evil spirit not to speak, he uses that same word, be still. Why don't you come on up here and we'll do some team teaching tonight.
That don't be in front of the camera.
Yes. With the disciples, Jesus, they want to obey the Lord. They know that they're a kingdom of priests. They've been set apart. And they want to make much or put the king on display. They're seeing more and more with greater clarity that he is the Messiah. So they want to put him on display. And they want to follow in obedience. What was one of the symbols that the Jews were given to represent their obedience to the Word of God, to the Torah, the commands? It's found in Numbers chapter 15. And the word, I'm going to stick it right here. Is this word, tzitzit. It's an interesting word. It's fun to say too. Tzitzit. And it means tassels. The tassels that they were to wear reminded them to obey the commands of the Lord. So here they are. They're probably going through their tzitzit, and they possibly are hanging on. Lord, we obey. We'll follow you. Hear, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And keep on going. And
Almost like turkeys, huh?
almost, but not. Well, I guess depends on who's using it, because anything like that can be used as just an empty formula. But where it's being used as a tool, it's purposeful, and that's what God was giving it to the Jews for. So they were being faithless in what they had just experienced. When Jesus calms the storm, he said to them, "Why is it you're so fearful that you have no faith?" And they feared exceedingly, or were greatly afraid, even at that. But the word that is being used there is different. The word is reverence, or to be in awe of. They were in awe. How can this happen? How can this be? And I want to go to Psalm 107. Why were they in awe at what Jesus just did and what he said? Psalm 107. I want to look at verses 29 and 30. Remember what I said, that biblical literacy was at its possibly at its highest at this point in time. And the northern part of Galilee and all around the Galilee area were probably the most biblically literate in all of the nation, apart from those, as far as the general population is concerned. So Psalm 107, 29 and 30. And I think we're at Melissa.
He stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. They were glad when it grew calm, and he guided them to their desired haven.
Wow.
It's so cool. It's just like what happened.
It's the fulfillment of the scripture, right? And the picture is even greater as we look at, spread it out a little bit more to the context. You can take time to read the chapter later. It's a fairly lengthy chapter, so it won't take time to do it this evening. But if you look at verses 25 to 27, would you mind reading those as well, please? Yes. Yes, please.
They saw the works of the Lord, his wonderful deeds in the deep. For he spoke and stirred up a tempest that high the waves. They mounted up to the heavens and went down to the depths. In their peril, their courage melted away. They reeled and staggered like drunkards, and they were at their wits' end. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress.
And then we read, he calms the storm and he silences the waves so that they are still. When it says they reeled to and fro like drunk men, it doesn't mean that they were drunken. It means if you're on a boat that's being tossed, you just don't have your footing, right? And you're unstable. And then it continues. Let's look at verses 31. Well, we could read on right to the end of the chapter, but let's just look at 31 and 32. Todd.
Let them give thanks to the Lord, for he is unfailing love, and his wonderful deeds for men. Let them exalt him in the assembly of the people, and praise him in the council of the elders.
So this is where they are at this point. It's like, oh, wow, thank you, Lord, that you got us where we needed to go, that we arrived safely at this haven. All right, let's have a look back at Mark chapter 5 again. Let's have a look at the screen. This is from Capernaum, and we're looking across to Gergesa. Then we have, we'll look at the next one in just a minute. So this is where they're heading to. So you can see that it's very, pardon me? We'll look at that in a minute. Yeah. All right, so they've come across, they've arrived at their destination. Even as Psalm 107 says, they arrived at their desired haven. So although they weren't really desirous of going over
It was Jesus' desired haven.
but for them, the shore is a haven, right? And they come to realize when you're with Jesus, where he takes you, it is a haven. So you can see from the screen that it's not hard to see from one shore where they began to the region of the demoniac, the Gerasa, or the Gadarenes. We'll look at that in just a second and explain that differentiation. So not that far away, but far enough when you're in a boat in the evening, because it's evening time. So they're losing daylight and a storm comes up. So put those things together and it becomes pretty daunting and perilous. All right, Mark chapter 5. He has the lengthiest description of this encounter of the three Gospels. He has 20 verses on it. So we've got Mark 5, 1 to 20. Matthew is still in chapter 8. He's doing it from verses 28 to chapter 9 and verse 1. And Luke deals with it from 26 to 39. All right. Let's look at chapter 5 and verse 1. And we're going to do Matthew chapter 8 and verse 28. I want to do that. Yeah, we'll do that way. Five verse 1 and Matthew 8 and 28, please.
They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when they came to the other side, to the country of the Gadarenes, two demon-possessed men met him coming out of the tomb, so fierce that no one could pass that way.
All right, so we've got Gadarenes. And the Gerasenes, and get the proper Gergesenes. What's going on here with this differentiation? Why Gadarenes and the Gergesenes?
My Bible has some manuscripts have the Gadarenes and some other manuscripts have Gerasenes. Could it just be a variant on the word?
Could it be a variant? We've got, let's put it in a different color to make it Gadara. So, Gergesenes or Gerasenes is a variation on the same word. All right? But there's a Gadarenes. So, Gadara is the region or the countryside. Gergesa or Gerasa is the city in Gadara. So one writer focuses on the country, although the wording may still say country, but they're focusing, one is on the region and the other one is on a more specified area within that. So think of the state of New York. You also have the city of New York. So they can be described by the same name, but one is the city and one is the region. They also have Albany, New York, and you can go on to other. Let's do this. Gadara is the country or region, and this is the city, town, region. So one is more specified and the other one is more general. So one of the writers will focus right on its more direct area, and the other one is more the broad region in which they are heading to. So it's not that there was conflict or contradictions going on, it's just the choosing to focus on one spot over another, but still in the same area. So if I said, all right, Frank moved over, he's over in PEI now. True story?
Yeah.
If I said that he's in Charlottetown, if somebody else says, if I said that at different times, you say, well, I thought you said he was in PEI. Well, I did, but he's in Charlottetown, in PEI. So it's the same idea. So he's in Gergesa or Gerasa in Gadara. So that's how you get the Gergesene or Gerasene in the region of Gadara, and they would be called generally Gadarene. Did I? Oh, I added one N. I added an N. Gadarenen. Gadarene. There we go. Does that help out a little bit? Okay.
Actually, I never thought of anything.
I want us to go to. Remember, this is the possession of the strong man. Remember Jesus in Matthew 12. Possession of the strong man. So Mark is going to focus on one man. Matthew focuses on two. Who's right? Why? How can it be if one says there's one, the other one says there's two?
The Bible doesn't lie.
Bible and it doesn't lie, but okay, let's work it out though. That's not going to work for a critic. So how, just because you say there's one doesn't mean to say there's only one.
We sometimes focus on the one.
So Mark's focusing on the one man. Matthew's focusing on both of the men. And Luke, he deals, I think he's just on 1. So the same idea. All right.
Yeah.
Let's go to Joshua chapter 3 and verse 10. What language is the New Testament written in? And the Old Testament?
A little bit.
Okay. Important to keep in mind as we look at Joshua chapter 3 and verse 10. And we are at Carolyn, I believe.
This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Pezerites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites.
Third last one you just read, what was it?
Girgashites? Girgashites.
There you go.
Girgashites.
So what does that tell you?
They weren't driven in.
No.
These are the same people.
This is the same region. Now, Joshua in 3 and verse 10, he's speaking about numerous regions in the land of Canaan, of which is the area that Jesus is heading to now and has arrived in Mark chapter 5, Matthew chapter 8, and Luke chapter 8. And he's told that they're going to do what of these nations, these people groups? He's going to drive them out. These people in the land at that point, they are strong men, if you will. They're going to drive them out. The word to drive out is yarash. And it means this. I'll state it a couple of times. I'm not going to write it down. It means to occupy, inherit, if you're taking notes. If you need me to stop and repeat, say so.
Yes, thank you.
Occupy, inherit. Ruin, R-U-I-N, ruin. Cast out. Impoverish, I-M-P-O-V-E-R-I-S-H. Drive out previous tenants. And possess in their place. Possess in their place.
Okay.
Yeah, so drive out previous tenants and possess in their place. Possess meaning ownership, not possess as in a demon possession.
Sorry.
Pardon me?
Here they are.
Okay. Anybody ever play Trouble, the game Trouble? Yeah. Or Frustration? I think that's a better word, better name for that game, Frustration.
Everybody else, I was well,
But when you land on somebody else,
they have to go.
they have to go. You've taken their place. So you have driven out the previous tenants and you possess in their place. That's the idea. It means, have I mentioned disinherit? Disinherit. And here's what that word in that idea is: without, all of these things, without fail. Succeed utterly in these things. Succeed utterly.
So The word that means all of this is
Yarash,
Hey.
drive out.
and that is a Hebrew.
That's Hebrew, yes.
So this word, it means all these things.
Yes. So Jesus, he's going to this region of the Girgashites. Remember, we're looking at it in the backdrop of the Exodus. The Exodus meaning not just the book of Exodus, but what the Exodus was intended to do, to bring people from death to life, out of a land of slavery to a place of their own inheritance that God has given to them. And this is what is being promised to them, and the promise is being given to them through, who's their leader? Joshua, who is a shadow or a type of Joshua, Yeshua, Jesus, yes. So Jesus comes from the Greek version of the Hebrew that in the English is Joshua, Yeshua, Yahashua. So here comes Jesus, and he's about to Yarash with these two men. For the sake of time, perhaps we will read one of the other two, Matthew or Luke. Your choice. First person to say is what we'll read. Luke, all right, Luke chapter 8. Is there only a few? Yeah, I guess there is. I guess I gave the choice. When an easier way would be, let's look at Matthew. Not to be conflicting, but just for time's sake, it's shorter. We may draw out a couple of details. Pardon me?
What you want to bring out.
Yeah, and we may look at Mark just for the couple of details. So we're at Johnny, Matthew 8, 28 to 34.
When he arrived on the other side in the region of Gadarenes, two demon-possessed men coming from the tomb met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. "What do you want with us, Son of God?" they shouted. "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs were feeding. The demons begged Jesus, "If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs." He said to them, "Go." So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. Those tending the pigs ran off, went into the town, and reported all this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed man. When the whole town went out to meet Jesus, and when he saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. And when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region.
Okay. As they have this encounter with Jesus, the Romans have a Greek influence upon them. And here's their mindset: that important people are those, basically those that matter in society, are ones that have made great accomplishments, contributions to society. Their appearance, so beauty or handsomeness, their status. That's what mattered to the Romans in their Greek mindset, the Greek influence. So for them, this man was worthless, or these two men were worthless. We'll bring up that next picture, hon, please. This is the ruins of a city, one of the cities of the Decapolis called Hippos. So think of hippo, like the water animal, hippo with an S. But what does hippo mean? Horse. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, water horse. Yeah.
Hippos means horse. Potamus means water, I guess, water horse. So we're not talking about hippopotamus, we're just talking about hippos, not hippos, hippos, being a horse, and also known as by the Jews as Susita. This is not where the man lived. This was the major city. So in Mark chapter 4 and verse 13, that this, when word reached regarding the pigs that were drowned, reached the countryside and the city they're talking about is Hippos Susita. The next closest city was 25 miles away, so this would be the one. All right, so as you look at this picture, just off, pardon me? Yes, Gerasene was not this particular one. So when I said the city, it would be more the localized area. I said city, but it wasn't city. I misspoke that. So the localized area. The greater generalized area was the Gadarenes. Yeah, it'd be okay. That'll probably be a yes. Yeah, so that's a little better idea looking at it that way. Yeah. When we look at this picture that we've got, we'll bring it up here. Sorry, folks. Looking waterways is looking north. It's looking. So Capernaum would be to the left of that, but along that green sloped area, just past there, would be the area in which Jesus landed. Cursi, Gergesa. This is where Jesus would be heading to. So this would be a city that's overlooking when you look at a polis, it's a free city-state. So Gergesa was probably more of a town region. This is a free city-state that was independent, and Rome allowed them to function almost as if it was an independent state that was loyal to Rome. So this city, they had a great influence. Have a look at the next picture. This is Caesar. This was a statue that was found there. Oh, the next one, sorry. There we go. Look really hard and you'll see Caesar. This is their king. And for being a king, basically they're saying he is king here. In the Roman Empire, they had the gospel. They had what was called the gospel. And it means good news. And the good news was that the emperor has ascended his throne. Well, here comes Jesus. He's about to kick out a king of that kingdom. Not Caesar at that time, but Satan. And as he comes, the city, the Susita, Hippos, these are the things that are important to this city. Caesar reigns there. We've got this next one. Any ideas of what this is?
Is that a tomb?
Looks like a tomb, doesn't it? It's a podium that you would stand on. So this is where they would have people that were important to their society, people of high status or great accomplishments, accumulation of things. They could contribute much to society, athletes and that sort of thing. And they would take that as their soapbox, so to speak, and they would be presented to the community as the ideal type of person. These two demon-possessed men, they would never be considered stepping foot inside the city, let alone being elevated to this type of a position. This is the mindset, though, of society. Jesus doesn't go by society. Good news, right? So to the Romans, this man was worthless because he had nothing to contribute. To the Jews, think about the disciples. This man, if you look at Mark's account, he's living in the tombs. We've already seen that with Matthew. He's living in the tombs. He's naked, so he's got no clothes. He is shrieking, crying out in the tombs day and night. And in verse 5, he's cutting himself with stones. So that means he's living in the place of the dead. That makes him unclean. He's naked. That means that he's not abiding by any of the laws of modesty. And he's cutting himself. That means he's constantly got oozing sores. That's another aspect that makes him unclean. Pardon me?
Undesirable.
Undesirable in a very big way, right? But Jesus comes for them specifically, saying, for me, these men have great worth. And when Jesus touches them, casts the demons out of them, I guess what symbolic when he touches them is what I was speaking of. He asks them, one thing I want to look at in verse 9. What is your name? What did he tell them? What did they tell him? What does that mean?
Many.
Why legion? But why? So if I were to say how many were there in the crowd, Melissa, you wouldn't say there were a legion of them.
3 times.
What is it? 6,000.
Wow.
6,000 is a legion. What is a legion? It's a group of Roman soldiers.
So they're legion. Warrior, yeah.
Now, the Roman soldiers, they were the Roman legion referred to as I'm going to write this down for you. Were stationed in one of the other polises. It was Scythopolis, also known as Beth-shan. So that's where, and they were garrisoned throughout Israel in different stages, but in Beth-shan or Scythopolis, I'll write that for you. Scythopolis, pardon me. Beth-shan, we were there, the ruins of that city. And garrisoned there was the Legio 10th Fretensis. This is referred to as the 10th legion. Oops, yeah, legio. Of the straits. Straits is referring to the straits of Messina, which lies between Sicily and Italy. And this legion was responsible during the civil war of Rome of being victorious and putting Caesar Augustus in power. Can you guess what their emblem was or their standard that they would carry, have on? Good guess. That was on every standard, so we'll put eagle. But specifically for them was the boar. Let's look at this next picture. This is the area of Cont'd. It's the only, no, that's a theater. Sorry, go to the next one. All right, that's the area of Cont'd today, Gerasene, Gerasa. And if you notice the next picture, this is looking at it from the sea, so as Jesus would have been approaching it. And you'll notice the slope down to the shore. It's the only place on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee that is sloped like this that would permit a herd of swine to run down into the water. See if there's something else I wanted to show you here. You can go ahead if you want past some of those city pictures. Another one there. So this is looking at it from the shore side and as well. So that's looking now back to Capernaum. Go to the next one. It's foggy, but you can see that Capernaum is there. That's where we're looking. Next one is an idea of the tombs that still exist on that hillside. And then the next one, you'll see the standard of the 10th Legion for Tensis.
They have the eagle too.
So they have the eagle, so that's standard in most of the legions. Go to the next one, just a little bit picture, or a little bit closer. Notice the L-E-G, and then the X, and then the F that's between the eagle and the boar. It's kind of obscured, but so it's a little bit in shadow for the screen. If you go to the next one, you'll see a coin, an embossed. All right, the eagle and the boar, the L-E-G-X-F, the Legio 10th or X for Tensis. I wonder if the reason that he casts the demons into the swine was to show, as those swine represented the legions, the 10th Legion, the power of Rome, that Jesus is all powerful, more powerful than Caesar.
It explains why they asked to believe, maybe.
And furthermore, where did they go? Into the sea, into the water, which represents the abyss. Put out there, Scripture doesn't conclude that for us, but it fits with a possibility. So it's there for your consideration. And the amazing thing is that now they're both, and Mark focuses on this one, verse 15, that they saw this man who had been demon-possessed and had the legion. He was sitting, clothed, because he was naked, and in his right mind. And I would submit to you that he's also healed of those lesions from the cuts and the scrapes that he had self-inflicted. Yeah, Jesus probably brought something along for both of these men, yeah. Yeah. And the people that came from the city and the countryside, they're afraid. He wants to get in the boat with Mark focuses on the one. We don't know if the second man wanted to get into the boat with Jesus. Maybe this is why Mark focuses on him. Nevertheless, Jesus says, stay here and tell everyone, tell your friends what great things the Lord has done for you in verse 19 and how he has had compassion on you. And we get the report. He departed and began to proclaim in Decapolis all that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled. We're going to see that Jesus will go to the Decapolis on one of his ministry tours, and many will come to him, and much of it will be a direct result and response to this man, or possibly these men's testimony of what Jesus had done for them. Well, that's the busy day. Gets back to the other side in Capernaum, and then he meets up with a couple of individuals that are in desperate need, and we'll look at them next week. I'm not sure, those that are online, if I brought that up for you or not, or if it was just going ahead without being on the screen. So I'll put it there for you for the moment. There's the standard with the boar.